All right, guys, welcome back to our white set review video for Strixhaven. We are going to be talking about every single white card here. In this particular video, I'm being joined by Yanks, the same person who helped me evaluate the previous cards in this series. So say hello.
Hey, everybody. Good to see everyone again, or hear everyone, whatever you want to talk about.
Good for them to hear you again.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
All right, so let's go ahead and just jump straight into the evaluations. We'll try to make these videos a little bit shorter than the last one. I know it was pretty long. All right, so the first card here is actually a lesson, which we talked about the learn and lesson in the previous videos. So we'll go ahead and kind of skip some of that. Choose one for 2 mana. All the lessons are sorcery speed. You choose one of these 2 abilities. Choose a non-land card name. Opponents can't cast. We see that kind of ability a lot, which is usually a little bit more constructed. They can't cast it until your next turn. So even then it's very limited. It's not a permanent thing like you would find with like surgical extraction type abilities where it just like removes them permanently.
Yeah, it's a pretty minimal effect. Really only works if you happen to know that they have that card in their hand.
So sideboard for sure.
Yeah.
Choose target non-land permanent until your next turn. They can't attack or block. It also can't use activated abilities. So this second phase could help you push through lethal or prevent lethal. A little bit more likely to be used in limited.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example of a lesson that is never, in any circumstance, making a main deck. But
Agreed.
if I can get it for free with the learn card out of my sideboard, sure.
Definitely.
It can do something. It's not an exciting effect, but it's an effect and it's a free card.
Yeah, so we talked about that a little bit when we were going over the learn ability with all the different lessons. All of the lessons, for the most part, feel a little bit underwhelming. So most often you're not going to want them in your main. But the same way modal cards, the first time they were introduced when they were a land or a kind of crappy card, they were just a free crappy card that took the place of a land late game. So then they were amazing. Their value skyrockets, right? Because comparing it to a forest, it's definitely going to be better. I'd rather cast something rather than nothing. So it's just a nice added bonus if you're getting value from your learn card originally.
Agreed. This is not good enough to make me force learn cards into my deck to get it. But if I'm playing them already, yeah, why not?
So the hard part about evaluating these particular cards is that you're not drafting this ever unless you have a reasonably high quality of learn cards. So are our lessons going to be split ratings?
I don't even know if they're split because you're just the only time it's even relevant is if you have them. Like, I think we just assume you have some.
Well, people might see the rating for this and think that they could potentially put it in their deck, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah. I mean, if you want to default to lessons, they could just be 1/something.
yeah, I feel like maybe there might be one lesson that's worth playing or something.
Yeah, there are some that are worth playing in the main deck, for sure.
So this is like a 1/.
Still, I think even I'm not even sure it's above a 2, even as free. Just the effects are so minimal.
I mean, we said the same thing about those initial modal cards too, and like even the crappy ones ended up getting played a lot more than we expected.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the only reason I'm hedging a little bit, because again, it's free. If your lesson is worth its own weight, then yeah, I definitely would like to just get this card for free.
Yeah, I don't think I would take it over much in a draft.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay, 2. I'm convinced. Ageless Guardian, a spirit soldier. It is a spirit, so it has some synergies with the Lorenhold Guild school. It's a 1/4 vanilla that does nothing, so who?
Yeah, if you got enough spirit stuff, sure, but you know, both white schools seem to want to be somewhat aggressive.
Yeah, it is going to stop like some of maybe like the pest decks, things that have a lot of like X1s. It's a really good wall for stopping more aggressive decks, which I do like.
Yeah.
I could definitely see sideboarding and putting this in quite often against decks that are trying to get under whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it's good again. It's good in lore hold because it's a spirit, and it's good against lore hold because they're making a lot of 3/2 spirits.
Yep, and they bounce. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's like a 1/5 with some sideboard potential.
Great. We are in agreement. Beaming Defiance, 2 mana, combat trick, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until end of turn.
Another fine combat trick. Anything that gives hexproof means you can, protect. You can use it outside of combat to protect against removal as well. So it's a little more flexible than other combat tricks. Prefer to see this at 1 mana, not 2, but
yeah, +2/+2 is awfully high for 1 mana.
Yeah,
for both abilities.
That's true. You saw it on like Blossoming Defense, but that was like that turned into a constructed staple, so you don't see it.
Yeah, I think for a run-of-the-mill common card, I think 1 mana would just be super busted.
True. You would never print it at 1 mana at common.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy on these cards, but I'm usually higher on combat tricks than you are. The fact that it gives hexproof, I'm usually over the moon about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll play this card. I've got it. I'm leaning towards a 2, but I'm close to a 2/5. It's somewhere in between there.
Yeah, I'm 2/5 for sure, and I think the quality of it goes up based on the quality of the cards in my deck. If I have things worth protecting, I would play this at like a 3.
Agreed.
Our first Magecraft card that we're taking a look at, guys. It is an 0/1 for 1 with Magecraft, and whenever you cast a spell or a copy of a spell, it gets +2/+2 till end of turn. So that's actually a pretty big bonus, but it's something that, has to be, has no value without the spell being cast each turn.
Yeah, it's an interesting mechanic in a card like this because this, on its face, kind of wants to be in a pretty aggressive deck, but it's hard to be that aggressive if you're putting that many spells in your deck instead of creatures.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's an interesting balance. I was reading these white cards. This is one of the ones I was having the toughest time trying to figure out how good, like if the deck that this fits in is really viable or not.
I feel like this is like a 1/2 in its heart. I think it would be extremely strong if it was a 1/2 that did the same pump ability in the aggressive deck.
Yeah, the fact that it doesn't really, you can't even really block anything with it without casting a spell.
Like if you could get in for some early chip damage and build your board and then kind of play your pump spells accordingly, I think this would be pretty powerful.
Agreed. I think as is, it's probably like a 1/5, and there is a deck somewhere where this is probably like a 3, but you will absolutely know that your deck is built that way.
I agree with that. I think it's going to be very unplayable in most decks.
Yeah.
It does always make combat damage very, or all your combat steps are going to be very difficult for your opponent. Not only theirs, but also yours. And I do like that.
Yeah, it makes blocking and attacking decisions difficult.
Yes. Because they're like, okay, if I attack into this thing, like you can play around a pump spell. Like, okay, white has +2/+2, but that +2/+2 becomes +4/+4. So like they can't even come in with like their big things.
Yeah, it does vastly increase the value of combat tricks.
Great. We have a 3/2 flyer for 4. It's a bird cleric. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. Vigilance is kind of nice. And it says target creature, it doesn't say target other creature, so it's a 3. It attacks for 3.
Yeah, it's a 4 mana flyer that attacks as a 3/3. 3/3 with vigilance, or like you said, you give it to something else. I'm pretty okay with that rate. Not a bomb by any means, but I'm playing this card in pretty much any white deck.
I agree. I don't think it's like groundbreaking by any means, but like a 3/2 flyer for 4 we're usually pretty happy with.
Yeah, and this is just flip the stats, which granted white usually wants to be aggressive, so 3/2 is generally better than 2/3, but having that ability is nice and flexible.
Well,
I think
but
I've got
this
it
is
like a
this
2/5.
is a 3/3 though. It's just better
Sure.
because
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just
yeah.
attacks. Now it isn't on the way back, but a 3/2 flyer for 3/4 you're not usually blocking with anyway.
True. True.
So I think this is just strictly upside compared to what we typically see. And the fact that you can put it on something else and trade up with them seems really nice.
Yeah, it is. I agree. I think on the whole, it is better than your standard 3/2 flyer for 4.
Yeah, great. And I think those are usually like a 2/5 in my book for like
Yeah.
the score we usually have. So 3.
Yeah, I think this is between a 2/5 and a 3, probably closer to 3. Yeah.
Great. Defend the campus. I do like the school synergies. They're pretty nice. So choose one. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Whoa, that's really nice.
Yeah, I think this card is great. Smite the monsters type effects, the second ability there are always playable removal.
Yeah.
Not premium, but playable. And the fact that now you've got an alternative use for it, especially in your like black, white, silver quill aggressive decks.
So both of these abilities on their own are usually borderline playable, but the fact that you can do either or is like, no, I mean, it goes without saying, obviously makes it better, but like, you're gonna find a really good spot for one of these abilities like every game. So the problem is you just never know which one. So this flexibility I find very nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think I usually like put the second effect at like depending on the format, between a 2/5 and a 3. So this is probably just gets bumped up to a solid 3, maybe higher, if you have a deck that can really take advantage of the first ability.
I agree. Yeah, there is a go wide in the Silver Quill school, so that's I think where this like first ability really comes in, and that they also have a ton of removal. So I think this is kind of built around that particular school. But I agree, the second ability is usually between a 2 and a 3 to me. So I like it.
Yep.
Super flexible. You end up paying for that ability because I think a lot of times the power 4 or greater are 3 mana, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's 4. Like I know Smite the Monsters was at 4, but I think more recently they've been
Judgment
at 3.
something?
There are
Legion's
some that are 3
Judgment?
mana. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so we'll go ahead and rate that one at a 3, guys. Your turn.
All right, Detention Vortex. Just a single white mana for an aura, enchant non-land permanent. It can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So that sounds like your pacifism, binding gold type effect, can hit any permanent. But it's definitely worse than that because of its last ability, which is 3 mana, destroy Detention Vortex. Only your opponents may activate this ability, and only as a sorcery. So your opponent can get rid of this anytime on their turn they have to.
For 3 mana only is pretty bad.
Yeah, I do not like this card at all. There might be some really aggressive decks that your opponent just can't afford the 3 mana and will die before they can.
Or you'll stabilize by the time they can develop the board and pay the 3 mana enough, right?
Yeah.
If you brick their first aggressive creature, then they play another aggressive creature, and then they pay a turn to get this out. By then you have a blocker, so you've really like kind of bricked 2 of their turns, which in an aggressive deck, the first 5 turns are very, very important. So I do think that that's pretty decent. So
that is, I was actually thinking in the other direction, like if you're an aggressive deck playing this on your opponent's like first blocker.
Yeah, I like that too. So it's good with or against, just like the 1/4 that you were talking about, how it was good for the Lorenhold deck and against the Lorenhold deck.
Yeah.
So very similar.
Yeah. That being said, I think overall it's still a pretty bad card.
Yeah, it's sideboard at best.
Yeah, I think on your own, if you're hyper aggressive, the fact that it's 1 mana lets you can turn 3 lock down their 2-drop and play another one of your own 2-drops. Maybe you play it in that deck, but everywhere else it's a sideboard.
Great. So one with some upside. Got it. Moving along. Devastating Mastery. That is a lot of white pips on this mana cost.
Yeah, it is.
6 mana, 4 white. You may pay 4 rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If the 4 was paid, an opponent chooses up to 2 non-land permanents they control and return them to their owner's hand. Destroy all non-land permanents. Okay, so you can cast it as a Wrath for 4, but your opponent can buy back 2 of their things. Or you can cast it for 6 with all of the white pips, and it just is a board clear.
Yeah, there's a whole cycle of these spells where you can pay to, color rather than pay their mana cost. Um, and the 4 mana option has a big drawback. I'm still playing this card just as the 6 mana Wrath.
Yes. I'm
It's
not
hard to
happy with the
cast.
4 mana Wrath.
Um, I'm very rarely paying 4 mana. I guess there's, if their board is wide enough and you can play it and they bounce 2 things and it takes them a couple turns to replay it, maybe you stabilize. Like, it's not impossible that I could see playing it at 4 mana, but I really don't want to.
Yeah, they have to have at least 4 creatures out to your 0 creatures. And then if I have let's say they're the aggressive deck and I've got a 2/4 back for my next turn, they play their 3/2s and I play something to stabilize, then that's good. But for the most part, you're going to not be getting the value out of this if you're casting it on 4.
Yeah, I'm mostly grading this as a 6 mana board Wrath, which is playable. Um, you know, the 4 white in its casting cost, probably drop it down to like a 3.
Okay, I was probably not even that high on it. I put it at 2/5.
2 5, yeah, I could see that. It's going to depend on what if you were heavy white or heavy the other color.
What color
In your
was
deck.
Day of Judgment rare or mythic?
Day of Judgment was mythic.
I was gonna say there is just because they have the same rarity level
Yeah,
roughly. So if it was at rare, you'd be just as likely to get Day of Judgment, but not
yeah,
quite. All right, Dueling Coach, guys, a 2/2 for 4. These words better be very good. When Dueling Coach enters the battlefield, play +1/+1 counter on target creature. Okay, includes itself. All right, 4/4 for 3 is better. Pay 4 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter. Oh, we've seen abilities like this somewhat recently, right?
yeah.
I don't remember what it
This
was.
definitely feels like a Silver Quill card.
Definitely.
Um, 4 mana, basically 3/3. Although flexible to put the +1/+1 somewhere else if there's a flyer or something that you have getting in. Um, 5 mana. It's a good mana sink
It is.
late game, but I'm not thrilled with this card. I would have to see just how much +1/+1 counter stuff exists in the set. I know there's some.
Well, it synergizes with itself when it enters the battlefield, so I'm okay to rate it based on that. But you're right. If we put it on something else and that gets killed, we do need a backup.
Yeah, and also it's the 5 mana is put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that has a counter. So if I'm only hitting one, I'm pretty unhappy with that.
Uh,
But if there's a couple things that get counters, it gets better.
I'm pretty generous with my late game 5 mana sinks. Like, it is just nice on the turns that you draw a land to be able to do something, even if it's small. Because there was another one that did that where you could pay 5 mana and just put a counter on something, and I was playing that all
Yeah,
the time. And that's essentially what this does. Is just you can't flexibly move it around, right? If it's just one target.
yeah,
So I'm pretty generous on it. I mean, that said, I don't think it's great. So, 2/5. It's a little bit better than base filler, but I'm not exactly happy to run it either.
yeah. I think I have it as a 2, unless you have enough counter stuff.
Yeah, I think there will be enough counter spell stuff to make it.
Yeah, there may very well be.
All right, Eager First Year. It's just a 2/2 for 2 basic bear with some upside in that every single time you cast a instant or sorcery, you get +1/+0 until end of turn, making combat very tricky for your opponent.
Yeah, I mean we see this type of card in every set. Your bear with upside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, always gonna play these. My deck, especially white, usually wants a lot of 2 drops. Um, you know, Magecraft, we'll see how the white decks how many spells they want to run, but it's probably like a 2/5.
Yeah, so the bear is usually a 2. It depends for me. I feel like the +1/+0 is minimal enough to where maybe it trades up, maybe it just eats like a 2/3. So, like, unless your deck is really built around it and has like lightning helixes and stuff, I still think it's probably pretty close to a 2 because I just don't know how relevant that +1/+0 will be.
Yeah, it's going to depend how often you can trigger that and how relevant it is for sure.
How likely you are to get in with it, or it could just trade with, an equal 2/2, regardless of its ability.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Go ahead.
Elite Spellbinder. For anyone that doesn't know, this is the world champion card for Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa, like it says in the bottom. So that's supposed to be him in the art. 2 and a white, 3/1 flyer. Enters battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You can exile a non-land card from it, and for as long as that card remains exiled, its owner can play it, but it costs 2 more to cast.
Okay.
So I mean, 3 mana, 3/1 flyer is pretty good on its own.
Yeah, and then it
Uh,
just slows your opponent down for whatever their next card is.
yeah, basically, depending, a lot of times it basically just delays their best card turns. Um, or sometimes takes them off curve.
Yeah.
It gives you, the information you get from seeing their hand is not irrelevant either.
Oh, definitely. I like this card a lot, actually.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily winning you the game on its own. I mean, a 3/1 flyer technically can put in some pretty big beats, but I mean, I don't think I'm in the realm of a 4. Those cards are usually far more impactful on the board immediately, but I like this at a 3/5.
Yeah, I have it as a 3/5 as well.
Great.
Above rate, the good ability.
Expel, 3 mana, exile target tapped creature. Instant speed, so you don't actually have to take a hit from it. Sometimes we see this ability at sorcery speed, which actually means you have to deal with the creature for a turn. So I think this is fine. What I expect to see in white for removal.
Yeah, we were pretty happy with, was it Iron Verdict last set?
Yep.
That was deal 5 to target tap creature. I mean, it had foretell, so it was a little different, but didn't exile either. So I think we'll be pretty happy with this.
Yeah, so this feels like it's a wash, right? So it doesn't have the foretell, so it's a little less flexible in the mana cost, but this also kills larger things and exiles them so that they don't become a problem again. So I think that that's probably equal or better to that foretell flexibility. So, I mean, I'm happy to run this. It's not premium removal by any means, but it's better than what we typically see for white.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we'll see this effect, but at sorcery speed, like you said, you have to take a hit and it's just destroy. So yeah, I like this.
Or 5 damage, and it just doesn't handle enough things. So I like it at a 3/5.
3/5 sounds good.
Normally my white removal like never sees 3/5. It's always like 3 or lower. Guiding Voice. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and learn. Great. So we've got some counter synergies for the previous card that we saw, and other things, as well as Magecraft, as well as free cards from Learn. So this card does a lot of things. On its own, it's not great, but it definitely has potential to do a lot.
Yeah, I'm not playing this card without some synergies, but there are multiple different synergies, like you just said, that it can have, and you probably only need one of them, really, to make it worth it. It's so cheap.
Yeah, so if you have like 2 of each different type of synergy in your deck, that's great. It doesn't really matter which one you have out, so long as you're hitting it. If you're always getting the learn ability, and then you're either triggering mentor or triggering, I'm sorry, not mentor, Magecraft or counter synergy or whatever. Like the other ones are optional, but I think if you're learning plus something, I'm happy.
Yeah, agreed. I think the biggest impact this card will have is if you have good lessons.
I'm gonna put it at a 2.
Yep, agreed.
All right, we have a 2/2 for 2 with Magecraft. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery, I should just start ignoring that part. Creatures you control, all creatures get +1/+1 till end of turn. Wow. So that will make combat very tricky.
Yeah, great go wide payoff on a perfectly reasonable body to begin with.
So if you have a deck like this that has go wide and triggers with Magecraft, are we running Revitalize?
Potentially. I need probably a couple of these,
Yeah.
a few decent Magecraft things, but yeah, I could see running it.
Yeah, because it's like triggering it and then cycling you into like more things. Now, even without a lot of Magecraft synergy, like even if you can't trigger this often, it still makes combat very difficult. It's still a bear at its worst. I'm happy to run this in every single deck.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm never cutting this card.
Yeah, so in any deck, it's like a 3/5. In a very good, aggressive, wide synergy deck with good burn or combat tricks, it becomes much better and it's just going to win you the game.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Very small text.
Yep. Mavinda, Student's Advocate. 2 and a white for a 2/3 legendary bird advisor with flying. And it has an ability, pays 0. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. If that spell will be put into your graveyard, exile it instead, activate only once each turn. So it basically lets you replay, for the most part, combat tricks from the graveyard for their cost, or something else that's instant sorcery for its cost plus 8. It's an interesting card. 3 mana, 2/3 flyer on its own is fine.
Yes, I agree with that. It is a mythic, so it's pretty underwhelming for a mythic, but if you have any combat tricks, it's pretty great. And then even then, late game, it lets you reuse all your removal spell. Now that said, 8 mana is a lot, so your removal spell would have to be pretty cheap, but there's lightning bolt, shocks, all sorts of things in the format that are pretty reasonable, so.
Yeah, you're most likely only getting some value out of that late ability in most games if they're combat tricks, but it's great with something like Guiding Voice that we just saw, lets you learn again and get another card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, definitely.
For just 1 mana. So yeah, I think it's I'm mostly just grading this on the 3 mana 2/3 flyer with some upside, so I think I've got it like a 3.
All right, I think I'm putting it a little higher than that only because my decks tend to run more combat tricks than your decks.
That's fair.
So I think the average deck would have several targets. Maybe the average deck will have 2 to 3 targets, probably. 3 seems maybe high for the average. And I'm pretty happy with that, though. That seems pretty strong to me.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, it's a good card either way, just based on it. Just its stats are good, although the art I find a little creepy, but...
I didn't see it. It's just a big owl?
Yeah, it's like the way it's, I don't know, his arms around her. I don't know, it just looks weird.
Is it a pedophile owl?
I wouldn't go that far, but...
You definitely shouldn't put your arm around a student like that.
Creeper owl, at least.
Creeper owl, okay. Just chilling outside on your tree branch. Yeah. Excellent. Moving on, guys. 3 mana, Spirit. They don't fly for some reason. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for basic planes, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your library. Return it from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, that's kind of nice. It's got like a buyback. It's kind of expensive and thins your deck a bit. It's not exciting by any means, but make sure you hit all your land drops, and it gives you a late game mana sink for like a body.
Yeah, I think this card is fine. It's obviously overpriced for its stats, but it replaces itself with a land, albeit, but it still gets a card out of your deck. And it comes back. You can pay 6 at the end of your turn if you've got nothing to do, or at the end of your opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm. And gives you back another chumper or whatever.
Yep, and gets another land out of your deck to thin your deck.
I'm not playing this often, but I mean, it's a 23rd playable card, so 2.
Yeah, yep, 2. It's a spirit, which is relevant sometimes. So
great. 5 mana 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, it's got some recursion, and it's an evasive creature. I think that I'm willing to pay the extra mana cost for the card value. And it's a spirit.
Yeah. I think this is going to depend on what's in your deck, but white probably will have enough targets that will make it worthwhile.
Yeah, also keep in mind, guys, that the Lore and Hold has a lot of cards that trigger when things are removed from your graveyard. So I think that will also trigger getting it back out, right?
Yeah. I have to read I think some of them trigger on when cards go to exile, but some of them are just when it leaves. So
if you're triggering something else, you're making like a 1/1 spirit or something, like it just synergizes very well, and it gives you a card advantage, which I'm happy on an evasive creature, as is. And a 2/2 flyer, I've definitely closed out games with a 2/2 flyer before.
Yeah. I mean, you're really paying 2 extra mana because we always play 3 mana 2/2 flyers. So
yes, great. Again, I agree. It kind of depends on what's in your deck, but this is a 2/5 or a 3.
Yeah, I've got it around 2/5.
Great. All right, Professor of Symbology. Oh man. Symbolism.
Yes, symbolism.
The Professor of Symbology enters the battlefield. Learn. When it enters the battlefield, learn. Okay. So it's just a 2/1 for 2 that doesn't have first strike, which is a little underwhelming, but gets you a free card, which probably kind of makes up for it if you have the learn ability.
Yeah, it works well with the card we just saw. Maybe this trades off for a 2/2. Then you can get it back and learn again.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you're, especially if you're trading and getting a free card, and then yeah, that's great. I agree. Dana Fisher, thank you so much for the raid, guys. Welcome, welcome. On its own, though, I mean, I don't know how common the lessons will be in the sideboard. That's something we're gonna have to kind of see how they kind of come into play, right?
Yeah, there's a good collection of common lessons, the colorless ones, which will help. But yeah, again, if you're not learning from this, you're not playing this card. So
yeah, exactly. So it does feel kind of a split card, but it doesn't feel good enough in either situation to warrant a split rating. So maybe it's just a 2.
Yeah, it's just a 2, because if you absolutely have to play a 2 mana 2/1, it's not the worst thing.
You're definitely going to be picking up a Strixhaven booster box. You should check out our sponsor and you get 5% off with my code. Cool stuff. Get a Nerd Girl token with your order. All right, reduce to memory, guys. It's a lesson. So sorcery speed, exile target non-land permanent. Its controller makes a 3/2 red-white spirit token. Spirit doesn't fly, so that makes me a little bit happier. But a 3/2 is pretty strong, but it does exile something much, much bigger. And non-land permanent as well, so it exiles planeswalkers or enchantments or whatever.
Yeah, so the 2 things that are interesting with this card is, first of all, you could target your own land, or target your own thing, like a 1/1 or something, and get a 3/2 if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
But normally these cards are bad, this type of effect, because it's kind of card disadvantage, right? You're 1-for-1ing, but you're giving them a token. So it's like virtual card disadvantage. But in this case, if you get this off learn, it's not really card disadvantage anymore because you got it for free.
Yes, I agree with that. And you were like a little higher on Raven form than I was for the exact same reason. And this just seems better than that. Now a 3/2 is a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't fly, so it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah, now compared to Raven form, the one thing that makes this worse is that it's in white, which has more removal than blue typically does. But I like this card just because the fact that you don't have that card disadvantage. I'm not main decking this card. This is going into my sideboard to get.
Agreed. Yeah. We're drafting it for the board. If you don't have the learn, then this card is not playable. If you have the learn, this card becomes like a 2.5, 3, which is around what I put the mist card at or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I like. That's what I like this as well.
It's great for free. Everything is great for free. You and target opponent each draw 3 cards. I
hate this card.
I've never liked the cards that make both of you guys draw. Like there's been creatures, like in Eldraine, there was if you whenever this attacks or blocks, you both draw a card. Like things like that I've seen a bunch of, and I never like them. They always feel bad to me.
So I know they're trying new ways to get card draw into white. And I guess this is one of the things they're trying. So here's this. Do you read the text and it seems neutral? We each draw 3 cards, but you spent mana and a card.
Yes,
they didn't, and they get to use those cards with all of their mana before you do.
Yes, I agree. I don't like this card at all. I've never really been a big fan of that, but like you said, it is card disadvantage because of you lost the card to make that happen.
Yeah. Now, if this was an instant, I'd be much higher on this card. I still don't think it's great, but at least I could play it at the end of my opponent's turn and untap and get to use the cards first.
Yes, I agree with that. Someone is suggesting a hyper aggro card, so like you go under them and then you just like refill your hand to finish them off before you run out of gas, which is true. Yep. But like you have to have it in the right spot, right? Like, would you want this over a aggressive creature that like finishes the job on that turn, on that 4th or 5th turn, rather than casting this? Or it's too late and your little creatures don't really do it anyway. So again, I agree. It's, you know, it not being an instant is kind of a deal breaker for me, even in that aggressive deck. I'd rather just have a 3/2 or something.
I think that's the only place it could see play in limited, but again, I don't think it's going to even in that deck.
Yeah.
I think this is just a one.
I could see maybe if my deck had like a ton of Magecraft synergies, like really premium ones, like the one that like gives all your creatures +1/+1, like the the good ones.
Yeah.
Maybe then the trigger off of this is worth the card, and then you're drawing more into spells, and the fact that your other cards will be triggering off of those spells make them have a higher value than your opponent's 3 cards. So maybe, but it's still very kind of cringy to play it, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Your turn.
All right, Semester's End. 3 and a white instant. Exile any number of target creatures and/or planeswalkers you control at the beginning of the next end step. Return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. They all come back with a +1/+1 counter on them if it's a creature, and an extra loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker.
Great. At instant speed, so you're at the very least removing like a burn spell for 4 mana, which is very expensive. And
yeah, it's a
go ahead.
4 mana mass blink effect.
Yes.
I can see there are decks that are going to want this, right? Just like you said, you can cancel out removal. You can use it to respond to a removal spell while also getting it out from under another card out from under an aura. Retrigger ETBs.
I think you're like average is going to be 1.5 good things. So you're going to get a removal spell, and then sometimes you might get like an ETB effect. Is probably like your best case, right? For the average. Yeah. If you happen to blink out like an enchantment removal, then that's infinite value. That's great, but that's not going to happen all that often.
Agreed. I think you're probably not playing this if you don't have a significant number of ETB effects.
Yeah, that's another good point from Sinvek here too. Like, let's say hypothetically you're going wider and you want to get some chip damage in. A lot of times you can't attack because you attack in, they block 2 or 3 of them, you lose those 3, and then you don't have enough back for the swing back, right, to finish them off. But hypothetically, if you have a very aggressive deck, you swing in with your 5 dudes, they block 2, those are the 2 you flicker, so that way they don't die, and you still have 5 creatures for the next swing, getting in that damage twice. So like it does give you some really interesting combat situation stuff. It can blink out of like combat tricks if your opponents use them.
Yeah, there's also some racing scenarios where they attack and figure you have to chump to survive, but then you just blink everything out that you jumped with and then untap and kill them on the
swing back. The combat situation's really interesting. I actually like that a lot more. I like the card a lot more knowing that it's got that really great flexibility, actually. And the white decks do seem to be the go-wide decks with the Lorenhold and the Silverquill. Silverquill being the main go-wide deck.
Yeah, I think you're playing this card. You want the right deck for it, but I think it's, I get this at like a 2/5.
I agree. It's a bit expensive. I think if it was a little cheaper, I'd be putting it higher. But yeah, I think it's a 2/5. You'll probably find a good place for it. At its worst, it's a 1-for-1 with some upside.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Great. Show of Confidence. 2 mana, instant speed. Whenever you cast the spell, copy it for each instant or sorcery spell you've cast this turn. You may wait. Oh yeah, you may choose new copy. So it's just a storm. What?
Sort of storm, because it only counts instant sorceries.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains vigilance until end of turn. Okay, that's kind of cool. More counter synergy. It's cheap enough to where you could probably do this twice.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll get one copy of it, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, good in Magecraft, good with counter synergies. Fairly low impact, but in the right deck, it can do some work.
I think I would still need some synergies to want this. It's like a 2. It's instant speed, so at least the counter is combat trick, but sorcery spell you've cast. That's another distinction there, is that the storm like counts your opponent's creature or opponent's spells, but this one doesn't. So yeah, I mean, I'd have to have a lot to make this good, but I don't think that I'm excited about it.
No, I think you'll find decks with enough Magecraft that'll just be happy with a 2-mana spell that can maybe get you a copy for 2 triggers, but I think on the whole, this is like a 1/5.
Okay, yeah, I'm in the same field. I think if you've got like the cheap things and the token synergy, it'll be a little bit better. Yeah. I'm assuming there's going to be something in your deck that's going to take advantage of this.
Probably.
If you don't, then yes, it's unplayable. All right, 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you learn, so you just get a free card. Plus, whenever you attack, oh, it's an enchantment. Put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature and untap it. Huh. Okay. It's kind of nice. I usually don't like enchantments on the board because they don't seem to do enough, and if I like don't have a creature or it's a bad top deck, if my opponent's running heavy removal decks, then they don't get their value. But the fact that you learn means it kind of replaces itself to some extent. And it makes racing really awkward. It makes your board get very out of control very quickly. Silver Quill is like a ton of flyers. So putting these counters on one of your Inklings seems pretty nuts.
Yeah, the art is telling you what deck this wants to be in.
Oh, I didn't even see that. It's literally got little inks in it.
Yeah, this clearly wants to be in the black-white deck in Silver Quill. On turn 3, which is an aggressive deck, so if you play a 2-drop and then play this, you replace it and you get a trigger right away.
Yeah.
I like this card a lot, actually.
Yeah, I do too.
In the right deck. But I think both, even in Lorehold, it seems like there's going to be still not as aggressive as black-white, but still on the aggressive side.
I agree. It's got to be kind of a slightly higher creature count deck just to like guarantee that you have a reasonable amount of things that are going to be triggering on this, because you have to assume your opponent has some removal. But if I've got 15 creatures plus, I'm happy to run this in every single thing.
Yeah.
I think in a heavy creature deck, this will win games slowly, but again, they can't attack you back. Your flyers get insane. It's going to get out of control very quickly, in addition to getting you that free value from the learn.
Yeah. Which I think puts it somewhere in the 3-3-5 area.
Yeah, I'm on the 3-5 boat. I'm slightly on the higher side, I think. Great. I feel like in the right deck, it will win games, so it could go up to 4-4-5 depending if you have like a little bunch of little inkies. But Star Pupil, it's a 0/0 for 1. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, but its counters on target creature you control. Okay, so this is a really good synergy with that the one that has that late game mana sink, right? This is just a creature that enters the battlefield with a counter, and then it's got a huge upside, so you're basically proliferating with your expensive 2/2, and then these counters then migrate onto something else once it becomes a bigger threat. So we're seeing a ton of this kind of counter synergy recently, and I do like that.
I agree. It synergizes well. It's still an extremely low impact card.
Yes. High synergy, low overall impact. So the average deck is not going to want this. The counter deck is going to love this.
Yeah. I think the counter deck will play it. I'm not sure how much they'll love it just because you're probably have something better to put your other counters on.
Well,
So
the
most
one
of the
card
time,
puts a counter on everything that has a counter on it.
sure, yes. Yeah, it's great with that card.
And then these counters come back an additional time.
Yeah.
And it does seem like there is a counter sub-theme. So I'm assuming there's also maybe some sort of other payoffs as well for counters or proliferate. We've seen proliferate once or twice, right?
Once in the archive.
Great.
But it was in blue, but it was on the Phyrexian map.
Oh, yeah. I count that as colorless.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And now that said, when I said that they love it, it's still a common 1/1. So I mean, they love it as in I'm super happy to play it at a 3 in that deck. And otherwise, it is unplayable.
Yeah, I think it's unplayable and everything else, and I'm still only thinking it's like a 2 to 2/5 in the counter deck, but maybe there's more payoffs than I think.
Yeah, well, that's true. We'll definitely have to see. I think that I'm guessing that there is, and you might be guessing that there isn't. Stonebinder's Familiar. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stonebinder's Familiar. This ability triggers only once each turn. So we have seen a lot of cards that in the Lorehold ability that like removes cards out of your graveyard. So you exile a card, make a spirit is something that I think we saw. So this will be like a bonus ability. So highly synergistic.
Yeah. The fact when this one just keeps growing is nice. And yeah, it's part of Lorehold's theme. On both sides, both the spirit and the leaves the graveyard synergy.
It's a little sad that it doesn't have any way to like remove those cards itself, like, you know, pay 3 and tap to exile a card or something. So like if you don't have those synergies, it's literally just throw it in the trash. But
yeah, because it's something you have to have. It's not something that just happens naturally in the course of a game.
Yeah. So the one thing I will say about these particular types of sets where they are built around schools or guilds is that those sort of interactions do come much easier. So it's not like something you have to actively look for. If you're in 2 colors, there's a chance that like most likely you're going to have these sort of synergies. So I rate them a little bit higher than I typically would in like a core set or something where you aren't pushed into particular archetypes.
Yeah, I think that's a natural outgrowth of the fact that you're only building for 5 limited archetypes instead of 10.
Yeah. That said, what is it, 2?
Yeah, agreed.
If you've got a couple of things in your deck that will maybe counter this, like put counters on this from time to time, it's fine. Otherwise, don't play it. All right, moving along.
Actually, it does also trigger, I didn't think about this at first, off of things like Expel, where you exile their tapped creature as long as it's on your turn.
Let me go back and read that card. Okay, yeah. And white usually does have a couple of exile cards, so that's fine. Stonerise Spirit, a 1/2 flyer for 2. A 4 exile a card from your graveyard. Target creature gains flying until end of turn. So here we have that synergy with the pup, right? Where you exile a card, put a counter, make it flying, do the thing, and hopefully trigger some other things that we've seen where you create spirits when you exile a card. This is just definitely a synergy card, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting effect. The target creature gains flying. It's usually a white effect, but that's usually a best in something like green-white, where you've got big green stuff to fly, as opposed to red, white, and black, white, which are going to be your primary white decks in this format that are going to be lower to the ground. But so that being said, I think you're right. I think it's the exile a card from your graveyard part that's the important part of this card, and the flying is a bonus.
Yeah, I think on its own, like a 1/2 flyer for 2 that does something, I'm usually kind of fine with, like a loot hawk or whatever. this feels like it's going to synergize very well with a lot of other commons and uncommons. In addition to just also being able to kill them by a stray 3/2, giving it flying each turn can kill someone.
Yep, I agree.
So I like this at a 2/5. I think it's going to synergize very, very well with all of the decks in its colors.
Yeah, I agree. I think 2/5 sounds about right.
If you're playing a lot of vanilla creatures, I mean, we don't run this, right? But I think that there's enough synergy in this set where I'm liking cards like this.
Yeah, I think I think again this would be better in red-white than black-white, but I think you'll probably play it in both.
Yeah, black-white will have enough flyers on its own.
Yeah.
Strict Protector, 1/3 for 2, and it's flying. All right, I'm already happy with its stats. Whenever a permanent enters the battlefield, causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability unless its controller pays 2. That includes yours. It doesn't say opponent, right?
Yep.
So be careful. But
yeah, this is more of a hate bearers constructed card.
Yeah, I mean, I could also see just it being a fine card if I don't happen to have any of those triggers.
Yeah.
I'm happy with a 1/3 flyer for 2 on the off chance it gets my opponent's stuff.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, the stats alone are fine to play this card. Confused as to why this spirit flies, but the other spirits don't. I mean, the last one did, but it was also a bird, so that made sense.
That's true. Yeah, this one doesn't look like this one doesn't even look like it should fly.
Oh, it looks like it's walking.
Plot holes. I like this card a reasonable amount. I think it's a 3. It's something at that point for a 2-drop I'm pretty happy to run.
Yeah, I've got it a little lower at 2/5 just because while the stats are fine, they're not really what aggro wants, and white seems to be pretty aggro.
Yeah.
But I'm still playing it.
I guess it'll also depend on how many triggered abilities there are that are relevant.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
Landfall or like those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know it doesn't shut off Magecraft because that's on spells being cast, not permanents entering the battlefield.
Yep.
But it'll shut off, permanent based learn.
Tap up to 1 target creature and learn. I've never been a huge fan of the tap cycles. A lot of times it's tap, draw a card, and this is slightly better because you're guaranteed you're not getting a land, but you're also guaranteed to get like a mediocre card most likely.
Yeah, it's a higher floor, lower ceiling.
Yeah, I'm happy to run this in multiple lesson deck plus multiple Magecrafts. Other than that, it's not playable.
Yep, sounds exactly right. Just very similar to that same effect in previous sets.
So I'll just put it at a 1/5. It's close to a split rating, but the problem is it doesn't get good enough to earn a split rater. Yeah, it's like unplayable or barely playable, so doesn't really justify a split.
A side note: how do you think that guy eats?
You just gotta be very careful to like you can't feed yourself on the side. You just have to like he eats like a lot of corn dogs, I would imagine.
Oh yeah.
All right, last card, guys. Tiny text, take it away.
Thunderous Orator, 1 and a white for a 2/2 wizard, core wizard with vigilance. So bear with upside already. Whenever it attacks, it gains flying until end of turn if you control a creature with flying. The same is true for first strike, double strike, death touch, indestructible, lifelink, menace, trample.
Huh. How about that?
Yeah, so we've seen that ability before on a rare from one of the core sets, Odric something. But that was like a 4-mana 3/3 or something. Seems really good. 2-mana 2/2 vigilance. I'm already probably okay playing. Not thrilled, but okay playing it. And just the
I'm
ability.
pretty happy to play it.
And the ability to gain, especially flying, and we already know black-white has a bunch of flying tokens, so it should be easy to have a flyer out.
Certainly.
I'm not sure on some of the other abilities, but it already seems fairly easy to get a 2/2 flying vigilance for 2. Yeah. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think that you'll get that quite often in the Spellquill deck. And that actually, it looks like he's performing, and this Spellquill or Silverquill is the like performers and poets.
Yeah.
He's like on stage. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I'm pretty happy to run this. Even if I don't have a ton of like first strikes or anything, I think that the flying is going to be common enough in white. Even though their spirits don't fly, there does seem to be enough. There's, you know, the 1/3 flyer, just like a bunch of random, the owl's common. So, what do you think for rating?
I think it's like a 3. What is interesting, and obviously there's a lot of gold cards in this set, so we'll have to see, but just scrolling through just mono white, none of those abilities exist except for flying.
Great. Yeah, I kind of honestly just rated it as just flying.
Yeah, yeah.
I think if you have a ton of the other things, it just gets way better, but like if you have the first strike, a 2/2 first striker doesn't necessarily get you a ton of value because like a 2/3 just kind of eats it. So the rest are hard to find and super situational on when they're usable. Like Trample is going to be meh, Menace is, you know, good, but again, might not be good enough. So I just like flying. I think that's the best thing, and I think it's going to be easy enough to get.
Agreed.
Great, so that's the end of white, guys. We actually finished all of our white ratings. So overall, what do you think of white?
You know, this sort of set it's going to be tough to tell because we need to see all the gold cards, but it looks aggressive, both in red, white, and black, white, which are going to be your primary decks. More counter synergy than I was expecting.
I will say that I feel like I don't have a good grasp of white. I'm pretty like underwhelmed with it. It feels like the synergy is there, but it doesn't feel like the synergy is good enough. Now keep in mind, guys, that this set has like 1,000 multicolor cards, so it's a lot more akin to like the guilds, right? To where the real power is loaded into those multicolor cards. So I think that this is just kind of the fluff that fits in between, and these cards are going to be better than we expect based on the synergy that we'll be getting from those multicolor cards.
Yeah, for example, right, in the all of white, we only saw one mythic.
Yes.
Because the mythics are heavily loaded in the modal cards and in the gold cards.
Yeah, there's sub 30 color, like sub 30 monocolored cards in each color.
Yeah.
Which seems really, really low. But how many multicolor cards did we say that there was?
There are 89 straight multicolor cards plus 14 multicolor modal cards.
Yeah, and we see a ton of sets where it's like one uncommon and like 2 rares in each, you know, school or guild, and that's kind of like it. You don't see any multicolor commons. Those are really rare. So this is just going to be completely different than what we normally see. So once we get to the multicolor cards, we'll have a better idea of how these cards will be affecting the overall gameplay. Great.
Agreed.
We won't have to go over that again for the other colors. That's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching our white set review. And if you're watching this, the blue one should already be up. So thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys. I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you who have signed up for our Patreon. I couldn't make this content without you. Also to Cool Stuff Inc. and KMC Sleeves for supporting the channel as well. Definitely check them out and use our discount codes to support the channel.